Hey everyone, welcome back to the FU Cancer podcast. I'm so very excited about today's topic because we're diving into the emotional power of food, how it can connect, comfort, and even carry us through a cancer diagnosis. Our guest today is none other than David Page, the creator of Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, and host of a new podcast, Culinary Characters Unlocked, where he digs into the stories behind the meals that shape us. David is a two-time Emmy-winning journalist and a master storyteller who spent his career uncovering how food reflects our identity, culture, and resilience. From war zones to neighborhood diners, David has seen how a meal is never just a meal. It's a story, a tradition, and sometimes a source of healing. Before conquering culinary TV, David worked as a producer for major networks, including NBC and ABC, reporting from hotspots across the globe, from Beirut to Eastern Europe. Through his production company, Page Productions, he's brought an unfiltered, deeply human lens to America's food scene, giving voice to mom and pop kitchens and culinary traditions across the country. His latest book, Food Americana, is a deep dive into the intersection of food, identity, and the American experience. Thanks for listening to the FU Cancer podcast. My name is Christina Rollins. I'm a dietitian, mom, and wife to a pretty awesome cancer survivor. We said FU to cancer nearly 25 years ago and are still going strong. I'm excited to share the FU Cancer movement, where we are a community of survivors, fighters, caregivers, and advocates, connecting our shared experiences, passion, and determination to live a holistic and well-balanced life. Stay tuned, because we've got a lot to talk about. Well, David, welcome to FU Cancer. I'm so very excited to have you on the show tonight.
Well, thank you. Glad to be here.
So you've spent your career uncovering powerful food stories from literally all over the country and the globe. So why do you think food and storytelling go hand in hand?
Well, they're both primal. We have to eat. And from the very first recorded history, people sat around campfires and told each other stories.
Mhm.
It's in our soul. It's, you talk about the development of language. People talk about first there was oral language, then people started to write stuff down. But we're all just motivated to say, hey, let me tell you about this. 60 Minutes, the founding producer of 60 Minutes, John Hewitt, you used to define the show as, hey, tell me a story.
So what originally inspired you to create Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives? And were you expecting it to be such a hit and to connect with so many people?
Well, what inspired it was the need to eat. Uh, as in, I was going broke. I had started a production company. I'd been in network news for many years, but was now on my own. Had started a production company, and for the life of me, I couldn't sell a show. And I was on the phone pitching the Food Network because I was pitching everybody. And this executive took pity on me and kind of offhandedly said, have you got anything about diners? And she had been saying no for months. And I said, oh, yeah, I got this show I'm developing called Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. And I told her all about it. And she said, that sounds pretty good. We have a development meeting next week. Get me a write-up by Monday. This was like late on a Thursday or a Friday. And I got off the phone. I was thrilled, except it was all BS on my part. I had made the name up on the spot. I was not developing a show called Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dimes. But I sure spent the next 3 days calling around the country trying to come up with stories for it. And it turned into the first they bought a special, then they bought a series. And no, it was absolutely not on my radar that this thing would become a hit, or certainly the genre defining hit that it became. All I wanted to do was get something on the air, and the rest was just a delight.
Well, many of the restaurants you've featured are family run or they're otherwise deeply rooted in the community. So, have you ever come across stories where food and cancer in particular intersected, either through a personal story or through a mission?
Yeah, there's a chef in New York, and actually, yeah, I guess he's in Brooklyn now. Most of his experience has been in in New Jersey and on Long Island named Eric Levine, who is a tremendous inspiration in that he has battled cancer 6 times while maintaining his career as a first-rate chef, building a group of his own restaurants. And I have to check back and make sure that this happened. But he was going in for knee surgery recently and planned after the surgery was over, after his recuperation, he's been planning to bike across the country to raise money for cancer research at a time, not to get political, when any money being raised for research that isn't government funded would probably be pretty helpful.
So, in your opinion, what is it about comfort food that's just so healing when we're going through times of illness or even grief?
Well, it's given to you by your mother in the first place. I mean, the things that we think of as comfort food are the foods that you were fed as a child. And especially if you come, look, I'm, pardon me, I'm stereotypically New York Jewish. Food equal love, but it's certainly not just my ethnicity that subscribes to that. In so many cultures, food is a way to express your love for someone, your concern for someone. And look, in the ultimate extreme, who doesn't think of like tomato soup and a grilled cheese sandwich when you're home from school with the flu as being somehow comforting? And again, it's a primal need, and when you are losing some of your sensations, some of your sense of well-being when you're ill, then food is there to make up for what's missing. Now, the downside of that is I've spent my whole life fighting a weight problem because pardon me, food quite easily can fill any gap
Mhm.
in your psyche, in your emotional arsenal. But no, comfort food is an expression of love, and it is expression, I think, of security provided by your parents when you were a child.
So, you've obviously had a ton of experience in the food world with different cultures, different environments. So, when you kind of look at things holistically, where do you think we get it wrong when it comes to food, or when we get it right when we're trying to support people in different scenarios?
Well, we get it wrong in following every BS trend that comes down the pike. I mean, today the hot trend is protein. All the food manufacturers are throwing protein into everything. Well,
Mhm.
protein's good, but so is fat. So's carbohydrates. I mean, we never seem to understand that. And I hate, look, this is going to sound stereotypically boring, but moderation is the answer. Variety is the answer. Now, over certainly the last century, as a culture, as this culture got more affluent, big business was able to, I don't want to say prey on it because business is in business to make money, but respond to, or in many cases, lead consumers into wanting certain kinds of food and certain things. And now we're deep into the processed foods era, where it would appear, according to many people, I'm not a scientist, but I think there are credible arguments being made by some scientists that we have gotten addicted in some respect to salt and sugar, and that, as with any addiction, we're going to keep feeding the habit, and the pushers who are producing this food will keep providing it for us. I mean, there's a bit of a conundrum here, which is on the one hand, we all say we want to eat well. There's this whole fresh food, whole food, good food movement underway. At the same time, that so many people who think they're doing that are spending money on food kits that come in the mail with pre-packaged things in little packs of plastic, and God knows how processed any of that stuff is. Um, we look, we want what we want, and the companies are going to give it to us. I'd like to see us truly begin to embrace the concept of eating good food for real, which doesn't mean monikers. I don't care if it's got the word organic on it. First of all, I don't trust that most of what's allegedly organic is organic. I don't think most people can define what organic is. But I would like my food to come from a guy who grew it as close to me as possible. A, because that means it's food that is genetically built to grow where it is being grown, where I am. So it's probably going to taste better as opposed to food that's been genetically altered, modified. And that doesn't mean GMOs. It means over time through breeding. I mean, tomatoes have been bred to be perfectly round, so you can put them in plastic containers and fly them across the country. I live in New Jersey, where in August, although not much this year, I don't know why, we usually have a bumper crop of Jersey tomatoes, which are fantastic. They're also ugly and misshapen, and if you looked at them, you'd go, ugh. But that's the most tasty kind of food. Look, what should you have for dinner? You should have something you cook. Uh, and it should be something you cook relatively simply, that you flavor with uh, with real ingredients as opposed to processed garbage. And it ain't that hard to do. On the other hand, it presupposes that you're willing to spend the 10 or 15 minutes, which is all it takes, to put together a meal from scratch, as opposed to the 30 minutes that it takes to drive to a place and pick it up and bring it home and all of that. And I've been rambling on this answer, but the bottom line is cook some stuff yourself and make it legit.
Mhm. Well, I want to switch gears for just a minute and talk about emotional resilience. So, in your experience, have you ever interviewed someone who did have that story of adversity, where having that food culture, that diners, drive-ins, and dives really helped them get through?
Well, the owners of a number of the establishments.
Mhm.
I didn't plan it this way, but when the show hit, and it became a hit pretty quickly, I started hearing from restaurant owners that, but for us, they'd have gone bankrupt.
Mhm.
It got kind of embarrassing at one point. My daughter was a competitive equestrian. We used to go to Lexington, Kentucky for horse shows. I kind of had to stop going to a local barbecue joint because they kept filling my table up with food and trying not to let me pay because they were on the way out of business, and we had saved their business. I think what's interesting is to see the role that some of these restaurants played in COVID. It was local family-owned restaurants that were kind of a lifeline in many respects to keeping people even feeling connected. COVID kind of isolated all of us. I'm thinking of the Triple X hamburger joint in West Lafayette, Indiana, which dealt with COVID about as well as anyone could in terms of how they redefined their business and putting tents up in the parking lots, et cetera, et cetera. And Greg and Carrie Harrisman, who own that place, are just great people. And they really provided a great service for their small town community by being there, by allowing, limited as it was, some human contact with people that other people knew. And look, restaurants play that kind of social lubricant role anyway. In so many now, not really chain restaurant. Am I a big fan of chains? No, they're impersonal and they pretend to be the independent restaurants that they're putting out of business. If Applebee's tells me one more time that they're my local bar, no, they're not. My local bar is a local bar owned by some local guy who, if you go to a chain instead, may no longer own his bar. So, but that's just me.
Well, David, your latest book, Food Americana, explores how food reflects our identity and culture. So, how do you think that concept applies toward people facing a health crisis?
Well, any number of ways. Number one, when you're facing a health crisis, you need some sort of emotional support, some sort of emotional resilience. And turning to the foods of your childhood or the foods that give you comfort can provide joy in your life that may fill a hole. Now, look, eating a hamburger isn't going to solve your problem if you're facing a serious illness, but it may make your life a tiny bit more bearable. And that's different than turning to food just out of loneliness and putting on 300 pounds. But I think, especially the connections that food can provide, and especially beyond that, using food as an opportunity to interact with other people. I mean, there's nothing better than getting together with people over food. Food, as I said earlier, is a social lubricant. And one of the things that I think people facing a health crisis are also facing is isolation. You know, you're sick. Friends are afraid to inquire. Should they be bugging you? Should they not be bugging you? The opportunity to use food as an excuse, if you will, or a reason to get together, I think is extremely important.
Well, just one last question before we wrap up. What message would you want to share with caregivers, patients, or cancer survivors just about the power of food and how it can uplift and connect us?
Well, look, my mother-in-law recently passed away at the age of 106. She was with us and with it pretty much until just a couple of weeks before she passed. And I'm the cook in the house. And it gave me great joy to give her the joy of producing the kind of food she wanted to eat.
Mhm.
Um, it was uh, it was gratifying to me. And look, she had done some time. I make it sound like prison. Uh, we she was in Florida. We're in New Jersey, so she was in assisted living down in Florida for a while. And look, that's not the greatest existence. The food is certainly not what it ought to be. When we moved her up here and she was able to take joy in a meal again, that felt pretty good. And I think, frankly, it added, if not months to her life, it certainly added quality to her life.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that and really for being here tonight and for all you've done to really raise the profile of food. It's just so amazing. So thank you for all of your work.
And thank you very much for having me.
And listeners, check out our show notes. We'll drop a link to David's podcast, Culinary Characters Unlocked. And of course, be sure to visit our website, fucancer.health. We've got a ton of great resources available at your fingertips to help you and your loved ones in their fight against cancer. Until next time, I'm Christina Rollins. Thanks so much for listening.